Welcome to the audiobook of The Great Housing Hijack. This section is called The 5 Housing Market Equilibria. This is Chapter 7, Absorption Rate Equilibrium, What Determines the Rate of New Housing Development. I'll start with a quote. You are a housing developer with a large plot of land on the fringes of a major city with no planning constraints. How quickly should you sell these lots to supply them to the housing market? Housing academics do not have a good answer to this question. Housing developers have rules of thumb, yet despite the uncertainty about what factors determine the rate of new housing supply, radical policy changes are being considered in many cities, states and countries around the world to entice faster housing supply from private landowners. End quote. The words above are how I began an academic paper in 2020. It was astonishing to me that, for over a century, economists didn't have a useful model for the rate of new housing supply. Property owners seek out the optimal housing density to maximize their return, but they also seek out the optimal rate per period of time to develop. This is why large housing projects are broken down into smaller ones and staged as a sequence rather than built much faster in parallel. It reduces risk and allows sales to occur incrementally to meet changing market demand, increasing the overall return from a project. Housing analysts who argue that we need to let the market rip to increase the number of homes always overlook the absorption rate equilibrium. Property owners will not flood the market with new homes just because the rules allow it. They haven't done that for hundreds of years or more, even before there were planning regulations. To develop new housing gradually is a normal part of the property monopoly. This equilibrium rate of new housing development is known as the absorption rate. Out of the queue of feasible sites across all locations, the absorption rate is how quickly those sites are picked off for development so as to maximize total economic returns. There is an equilibrium because even when it is profitable to build, it can be more profitable not to build. Property with feasible housing development rises in value over time even when undeveloped, and oversupplying housing means selling at a discount, so most feasible development opportunities are left undeveloped. The absorption rate is where the gain from selling faster equals the gain from delaying and developing more slowly. In the analogy of the supermarket queue, you can move the next new home from the queue of dwellings for sale today to the queue of dwellings for sale tomorrow, or next month, or next year. When I worked for a publicly listed property developer, FKP, in 2004, I was told by one of the managers there that in the 2002 boom, they misjudged the pricing for off-the-plan sales at a Sunshine Coast apartment project because the market had moved so quickly. Market prices had risen more than 30% in a year. There was a queue of people at the sales office on opening day, and by mid-morning, dozens of sales were made. The listed prices, which had been set a few months earlier, now seemed cheap to buyers. Continuing to sell quickly at these older prices and undercutting rivals was not the optimal thing to do. It was a giveaway to buyers, who could turn around and resell their purchase to the next buyer at a higher price if they wanted to. In response, the company closed the sales office early and put all the prices up. Instead of the project selling out in a day, it took years to sell the remaining apartments in that building at higher prices. But selling slower was the approach that maximized the overall return from the project. This section's called The Relationship Between Selling New Homes and Building New Homes. In Australia, new housing is almost exclusively developed with a build-to-order model so as to minimize risk. New homes are sold before they are built, whether that is off-the-plan apartment sales or land and construction packages. Like in every market, selling faster requires lower prices, or as economists would say, demand slopes down. This is why businesses discount prices to clear old inventory faster. Property developers can observe how fast they can sell at different price points and discover what is the best rate of sale and price combination. It is possible to determine whether the sales rate last month was too high or too low by seeing what is possible next month and the following one, as selling too fast one month will mean slower sales and lower prices the next month, and again the following month, and selling too slowly means more sales next month. Since buyers only enter the market at a given rate, it makes sense for developers to match that rate. You adjust sales rates and prices over time to capture the most gains, and this rate is the absorption rate equilibrium. A useful analogy might be how quickly you choose to eat. Sure, your budget and the stocks of food in your fridge, with that you could eat faster, but you match your intake of food to your appetite as it grows. In any meal, you could eat more, but you have a downward sloping demand for food per period of time, which means you stop eating now and save food for later on when your appetite has recovered. The same with developing property. You don't eat tomorrow's lunch today. This happens for each housing project and across the market. If your rival starts selling and building a new project, it is often better to wait until their project has finished to start yours. As property industry consultant Brian Haratzis told the Australian Financial Review in 2023, I'm quoting Brian here, "If you understand your competitors and that they have not got much land left, you'll reduce your supply and wait for them to finish and jack your price up." End quote. The same principle also applies to build-to-rent housing. Buyers of that housing are just a different type of home buyer. They happen to be large institutional investors instead of smaller investors or owner-occupiers. They will be responsive to local rental market conditions. When rents fall, it pays to slow down new supply so that future rental returns are not depressed. This section's called a hypothetical. Consider the hypothetical case of a new apartment project consisting of 5 buildings. One way to approach this project is to develop it all in one go, to set the prices and start selling today. If sales slow down at the current price, then decrease the price to boost sales. After all, inventory backlogs are cleared with massive price discounts for most other goods. But that approach doesn't make a lot of sense here. What's the rush? You only have one shot at this project. It's not like bananas, where you need to sell all this season's harvest before the next season arrives, and so you discount prices to clear that inventory. Another approach is to break the project into 5 stages with 1 building in each. Sell 1 building at a rate per period where there is no gain from selling faster and pushing prices down, or from selling more slowly and pushing prices up. Keep the other 4 as an undeveloped land bank, an asset on your balance sheet like any other, and only start them after the first building is successfully sold. This was a free sample of the audiobook of The Great Housing Hijack. To get full access, sign up as a paid subscriber at fresheconomicthinking.com.